She was the victim of sex trafficking as a child. The suspect? Someone you would never suspect. Her father, a deputy sheriff, died by suicide. And she's had a remarkable life and recovery since. She's here to talk about that on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Newsbreak. In particular, our profile on Newsbreak, the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. You can do a Google search. Just search for Law Enforcement Talk Newsbreak, and you'll get access to it. You can download the app for free, the Newsbreak app. Just go to your app store of your choosing and download it. Be sure to look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast and follow us. You'll get great news, great articles, local news, and much more, all on the Newsbreak app, which is 100% free. So download it today and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast and let a friend know. Share the post. Hey, there's an idea. Share it on social media and tell everybody about the Newsbreak app, in particular, Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Remember, it's free. Contact us from the great state of Florida, where I happen to be. We have Tammy Tony Butler on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Before we introduce her, I want to tell you, if there was ever a story that was more inspiring about creating a life you want, having a full life after tremendous trauma from the darkest spots you can imagine, if you look in the dictionary, Tammy Tony Butler's photo should be next to that. For when it comes to resilience and growing a life you want, that's who we should be looking at. Tammy, thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. And, I'm going to be honest with you. I went to your website. And by the way, her website, reflectivespacesministry.com. And she wrote a book called A Journeying Journal to Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. I went to your website, Tammy, before the interview, and I'll be honest with you. The older I get, I don't want to say the more judgmental I get, because that's not true and accurate. However, I'm just not the most social person. If I saw you in the checkout line in the grocery store, I would never, ever imagine you went through this, ever.
Well, that's the beauty of even my story, is there's so many that are out there like me that have gone through so much darkness, but have found the light and been transformed.
It's amazing. And here's the thing that I guess I'm really getting at is people tell me all the time, and I hear this quote all the time, well, they didn't look like a killer. They didn't look like a child molester. They didn't look like this. They didn't look like that. And I'm thinking, what are they supposed to look like? Oh, Ted Bundy did not look like a serial killer. And you don't look like someone who's been through the darkest days and back and built a wonderful life since. And that's the thing I'm trying to get at, is that we see people, we just don't know their stories. We don't know where they've been through.
It's so powerful that you say that. And that's a lot of work that I do in the space of trauma, and also creating a safe space to share some of the darkest secrets. When you meet someone, you never know what they're going through. You don't know their backstory. You don't know if they're actually in that moment contemplating suicide.
Right.
And you may be the only person that acknowledges them, gives them a kind word, and makes them stop and focus on the light instead of letting the dark overtake them.
The one thing I would say, too, is when people look at me, and granted, I didn't go through anything like Tammy went through. I didn't go through what you went through. I went through my own set of trauma as a police officer in Baltimore that I talk about quite often, but I don't go into a lot of details because that's really not what the show's about. But when you look at me today and you would never know, I know I still, inside of me, I carry this little part of me that's like, if people really knew, they wouldn't be so nice to me. But do you ever inside think, man, if people really knew, then they would treat me differently?
Maybe I did years ago, but now that I've been completely made whole and I'm a new creature, after child sex trafficking, it was only when I wrote an article published in the National Library of Medicine on human trafficking that I went, oh, wow, that's what happened to me. It wasn't just multiple childhood sexual assaults. And I actually took a Homeland Security agent out for a beer at the time. I don't drink now much, but took him out for a beer, and I asked him a question. I said, this is kind of what happened to me. I said, that you kind of describe me. Is that, am I a victim of human trafficking? And when he said yes, that would have been considered human trafficking, then I had to look at, well, wait a minute. That would have made my mom the trafficker, because she knew what I was going through and she allowed it. But I didn't fault my mom because she had her own trauma and she parented in survival mode. Yeah. And so I try not to paint everyone with the same brush. Instead, I try to focus on wholeness and recognizing that even though you've gone through something bad or seen something bad, then you can be transformed and have a new life.
Yeah, you can. And I think you're a perfect example of that. And for your story, I know I'm a perfect example of that. But what I guess I was getting at is people see the end result. They don't see the work that took to get here to where I'm at today. And is that a good explanation for you?
Oh, absolutely. When people look at me, they saw, well, I was an ER nurse for almost 30 years, and I just did boots on the ground, always in the ER bedside. And then I became a sexual assault nurse examiner. But when you look at me or you look at my CV, you see, a published author, you see someone who, was, in charge in the emergency department, who seemed to have it all together, but yet I was dead on the inside. And I had not spoken about what happened to me as a child, but it started to creep through panic attacks. And obviously I had, moments of emotional flashbacks to where I would get so angry. And I just didn't want to look inward, because when I looked inward, that made me feel dirty and full of shame. And then it was only through my faith that I was able to be completely transformed into just this new creature today. And so people have a difficult time looking at me and thinking, wow, you went through all of that. I mean, I lost my dad to suicide. I mean, right. I was a teenager and we buried him on Father's Day, and he was a police officer. He survived Vietnam, but divorced my mom. He was pretty much an absent father, turned to alcohol to cope, and lost his battle and shot himself in the heart, and we buried him on Father's Day, like I said, when I was around 15, 16 years old.
And by the way, my first wife was an emergency room nurse at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And there's the old there's a stereotype of police with donuts, and we can talk about that all day long, the reason why. And there's also a stereotype about police with emergency room nurses, and somehow or another, there's a lot of truth to that one. I don't know why. We could pontificate on that one at length, but I think part of it is, Tammy, is that these type of personalities in police work, in emergency room nurses, they're trying to help people. But maybe it's because some of them have their own thing that they can't resolve. Oh,
absolutely. I was a wounded healer, and I thought that if I healed myself, that if I healed everybody else, somehow that would heal my brokenness and heal me. And when you look at the 4F responses to trauma, and Pete Walker's book does a good job of that, complex PTSD from surviving to thriving, you see that we can overwork or overplease, and we can go into these helping professions, right? Because we're trying to replace something that was missing. Maybe we were abandoned as a child.
Maybe it's a thing where being the superhero will help make us feel better. Maybe it's adrenaline. I don't know. We're talking with Tammy Tony Butler. She was a victim of sex trafficking as a child. Her father is a Gwinnett County police captain who died by suicide. Her husband recently retired from the sheriff's office. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com. She's the author of a book called A Journeying Journal of Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Have you heard of CreativeCon 2025? You should check it out. The website is CRE8TIVE.com. It's going on at the Intercontinental Hotel in Chicago, February 21st to 23rd. You get to meet great people like myself, John J. Wiley, host of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and so much more. That's CreativeCon 2025. Well, you'll learn how to take your business, no matter what you do. If you're an entrepreneur, business leader, author, podcaster, or online professional of any type, take your business to the next level. Get more details online at CRE8TIVE.com. Again, that's CRE8TIVE.com.
Imagine contacting millions of people every month using Facebook from the comfort of your home or business. How much would you increase the success of your business or service if you could do that? I do that every day, and so can you. Plus, earn a separate revenue from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return our conversation with Tammy Tony Butler on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com. She's written a book called A Journeying Journal Through Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. She was sex trafficked as a child by her mother, which we'll talk about in a few moments. Her father was a Gwinnett County police captain who died by suicide, a Vietnam veteran. And her husband recently retired from a sheriff's office in Florida. She's a retired emergency room nurse. She's got a lot to offer. First of all, Tammy, thanks for sharing your story. These are not, we're used to having non-comfortable conversations. But you said earlier in the interview, you wrote a piece for a prominent publication about human trafficking. And that's when the things that you went through started coming to light for you, wasn't it?
Yes, and I even, had a conversation with my husband, and I said, I'm kind of grappling with this because I thought that it was just multiple childhood sexual assaults that started when I was around kindergarten or earlier. And when I started really listening, and looking at the definition of human trafficking, I was the commercial product because when I went to let my mom know what was happening, and it had been going on for several years at the time, she said to me, well, how will I pay the rent? What will I do? I can't work. I have a nerve problem. He won't do it anymore. But yet she didn't leave him. And I had to endure many, many years of sexual servitude at the hands of this gentleman. And my mother would know when he would beckon for me to be sent to a shop of horrors at the back of the wood line. She knew that she was making me walk down there and what I was going to have to do. Again, she has died, and we had a conversation before she died because I had to let her know that what happened to me was considered human trafficking and that I was active in that space, and I was going to have to let individuals know, and that wasn't going to paint her with a beautiful brush. And she said, if you can keep this from happening to any other family and destroying their lives, then you do it. She, too, had been transformed by her faith, and she was a different person. Trauma did destroy her. She died early through complications from obesity and using food to cope, which we know, right? Addiction. What is addiction? It's just coping with an underlying trauma.
Yeah, look, I have very few vices left. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I've been sober like 32 years. I don't smoke. I quit smoking like 25 years ago. I try not to curse because of radio. The one thing I left in my life is food. That's it. I'm a happily married guy, and, well, comes that territory, but you can't take everything away. Come on, I got to have something, Tammy.
Spoken like a true police officer. Now you can understand this love relationship.
I always battle with my weight.
ER nurses have.
Yeah, I always battle with my weight. I always battle with eating junk food and the stuff that, and part of it comes from, I think, the ER nurse and the policing is that you don't know when you get to eat, so you throw something down your face really, really quickly, and it's usually not good for you. It's handy. It's a donut. It's a pastry. It's a hot dog. It's something else because you're just trying to take the wrinkles out of your stomach. That's all you're trying to do in between calls. And now I try to enjoy myself, but I want to get back to your story. One of the things that Hollywood would say, and by the way, you were older in life when you came to this realization, weren't you?
Oh, yes. I think I published that article in 2016, 2017-ish.
Right.
And have really been on a whirlwind tour of healing and to wholeness ever since.
Well,
so,
I'm glad you did.
I'm in my 50s now, so.
Well, here's the thing, and this could tell you how I lived a reasonable, it wouldn't be the Hallmark kind of childhood, but a good childhood, because I can't remember anything from kindergarten, pre-K. I don't remember those years. My memory really starts around 4th grade, and that's, by the way, coincidentally, when I started turning into a knucklehead, getting in trouble in class every day and all that stuff. Before that, I was a great kid. And I'm not a bad guy. My mom will tell you. Mischievous, yes, when I was a kid. As an adult, not so much. But Hollywood paints this image that people that have gone through severe trauma, especially sexual abuse, women who have been sexually abused, they go through all kinds of negative things that involve drinking, drugging, doing poorly in school, not doing well with relationships, in and out of jail, in and out of mental institutions, all that stuff. You don't strike me as that kind of person.
Oh, well, I tell you, God's hand has been on my life because I did some stupid things that could have gotten me in trouble and arrested. The only reason I'm here, is by God's grace and my faith in Christ. And, it's that transformation because I would drink alcohol and take a sleeping pill to get to sleep. Mm-hmm. And I would drink a couple of bottles of alcohol. I struggled with food. I was addicted to food. I was addicted to sex. Yeah. I thought if I loved everybody, had love in all the wrong places, then I would heal that ache that was inside of me.
They'd fill that hole,
yes,
that sense of emptiness. Yes. And that, look, I don't know that it's caused by the trauma. I haven't figured that out, but I just know that it's, and I don't want to belabor this point. One of the things he said is I had a God-shaped hole in me, and I tried to fill it with everything else, and nothing else worked. And I could only fill it with something that's shaped like God, and that's all worked well for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I'm the same way. That's what happened to me because he filled up that empty space. But he also painted me in a light to where I am worthy, I am beautiful, and I'm not what happened to me.
Right.
And I just, said this to someone the other day that I was working with in healing, and I said, you can't have one foot in the past and one foot in the present. It takes 2 feet to walk into abundant life. Mm-hmm. So you got to pull the foot from out of the past so that we can walk into abundance, into that life that is ours. And we get to grab hold of it because we have the power. We have the control. They don't have it, those that did those horrible things to us. We possess it. We walk in victory, and we own and paint the world that we want to see.
One of the things that really helped me, and it took a long time, people look at me now and I'm a content old guy. That's cool. That's great. But they don't see me when I was 32. And I carry a picture of me with my wallet when I was 32. And I was 184 pounds and not in good shape, mentally, spiritually, physically. Everything was horrible. My marriage was horrible. The relationship with children was horrible. Everything was bad. Now I'm a happy guy and everything's going great. But they don't see the work that it took. And one of the things that really helped me is I had to learn this philosophy to be harsh on myself, but not with other people. And doesn't mean I'm not demanding. I am, very demanding as a person, but I'm not the taskmaster, and I don't sit there and say, well, you messed this up. I got to focus on what I'm not doing right to get to where I need to be. We're talking with Tammy Tony Butler. She was sex trafficked as a child. Her mother was a culprit. Her father, police captain in Gwinnett County, died by suicide. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Her husband's recently retired from a sheriff's office in Florida. She is a retired emergency room nurse. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com, and she wrote a book called A Journeying Journal to Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. Get more details about that on our website. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
What could you do with an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more? All earned from the comfort of your home or business, and all with Facebook. Meta is paying people just like you every month. They are earning tens of thousands of dollars, and so can you. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Return conversation with Tammy Tony Butler. She was sex trafficked as a child. Her mother was the suspect. Her father, a police captain in Gwinnett County, Georgia, died by suicide. Her husband's recently retired from the sheriff's office in Florida. She's a retired emergency room nurse. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com. She wrote a book called A Journeying Journal to Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. Tammy, I so appreciate you telling your story, because we get inundated with people. I say we, not just me, but we get inundated with nothing but horrible and horror and horrible stories and trauma. And people don't see, oftentimes, there's light at the end of the tunnel, that life can be a whole lot better. It doesn't erase everything that happened before. It doesn't erase everything about us. That's all part of my DNA. But there's a great life beyond that. And you're a walking, talking example of that. Now, I want to shift your attention to your teen years. Your father, obviously, lived in Georgia. Your father was a police captain in Gwinnett County, Georgia, and he died by suicide. You also said earlier he was a Vietnam veteran. What happened, and how did you find out about this?
Well, I was in the throes, of being horribly victimized as a child. Now what I know was sex trafficking. Not that I ever told that. I never told anybody that my mom was involved in any of those things. And I knew that inside I needed to get away from my mother, or I was going to be opened up to being victimized again. This individual that this happened to had gone, that had violated me on more than one occasion, had gone to prison. And so he was out of the home, and I wanted to reach out to my father because I thought I need to go live with him, because this isn't going to end well. I'm going to get in trouble again, or something's going to happen. And it did, but that's a whole nother story, a whole nother show. So anyway, I was going to make that phone call to my dad. I was around 15, I think, 1988. So I can't remember the math exactly. I think it was 1988 he died. Anyway, the phone call came to me that they had found him and that he was dead by suicide. And that was on a Friday the 13th, and we buried him on a Father's Day, June 15th. And so I realized that he wasn't going to be my savior. Now, he was an absent father. There was, an affair, and he had left my mom and divorced her after coming back from Vietnam. And I think he did the best he could and tried to cope. I know there was an issue with alcohol, because I can vaguely remember some memories of seeing him with a flask and drinking. But one thing that struck me was, I believe he felt such guilt over what happened to me as a child, because the day that he died and took his life, on the check, the child support check that was mailed to me, it had my name in the for section, and he had never done that. And all the other checks that were ever mailed, the name was not there, and my name was on the check. And I just believe that he felt such guilt for not protecting us as his children, especially with him being a police officer. That's the thing with suicide. You never know.
Right.
And in order to heal, you have to stop asking the question why, because even if they were alive, many of them never tell you the why. They don't. It's a dark, dark moment. Many of them don't let anybody know they're about to take their life. So you couldn't have done anything. I couldn't have done anything to stop it. And he may not have realized he was even going to do it, because it's a split-second moment, especially if you are, have an elevated blood alcohol content, which he did have, if I remember correctly. And so you don't know in that moment what he was thinking when he pulled the trigger.
No, we don't.
But
and here's the problem with
we don't.
With police in general, and the suicide problem with police and military veterans and other first responders has been horrific since I was a kid, and probably before that. People think it's a relatively new thing. Joseph Wambaugh wrote about it in the 70s and 60s in L.A. It was a huge problem. And by the way, when I came on as a rookie policeman in Baltimore, I was trained by a lot of Vietnam combat veteran police, and they were some of the best police ever. We had a few Korean War veterans that were command staff, but a lot of Vietnam veterans. As a matter of fact, all of our helicopter pilots at the time were combat Vietnam veterans, and they really knew how to fly. But here's what leads up to this. There's usually PTSD of some sort, results of trauma. I don't like the PTSD, the disorder part. I prefer to phrase it as post-traumatic stress injury. It's a normal reaction, but there's things you got to do. So he had combat experience in Vietnam. He had all the trauma of police work. He had the so-called guilt feelings of your childhood that he had to deal with, the failed marriage, probably substance abuse with alcohol. And when all those things collide, and usually there's one other thing involved, and it's getting in trouble at work. When those things collide, quite often, the end solution is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and it's close at hand, and it's a handgun. And a lot of people choose that, and it's not any way that anybody should have to go. It really is not.
It's not. And what I want all of your listeners to really take to heart, and especially if you are in a dark place and contemplating taking your life, I want you to know there's never a moment I wasn't proud of my father. There was never a moment I didn't want him to be a part of my life. I still long and ache for the love of a father.
Right.
And even though he saw himself that he could not measure up, in my eyes, he was everything, and he was a great father.
You sound like a country song there when you're saying that right there. You just need to stop that. Get me crying here in a moment.
Oh.
And by the way, I do ugly crying. I don't do that, gentle sniffing stuff. I'm a bad one. So while it contained myself, you were 15 when you found this out. So you already had, and I'm air quoting the term baggage. You had the baggage that came along with the sexual abuse in your early childhood. You had your dad dying by suicide when you were a teenager. You had other issues going on. This had to have a profound impact on you through your teen years and your early adult years.
Oh, yes, it did. And as I said before, another male was moved into our home, and the rent got paid, and it was a much older boyfriend, and I thought that I was in love, but I was, I think, around 15, and he was his late 20s. I can't 100% remember, but there was a teenage pregnancy there, and there was issues, and it just was trauma after trauma after trauma. And so I thought the only way is education and to get out. And I can also remember having the trauma of them saying, you're pregnant and you're in school and we frown upon that. And maybe you should just drop out. And I thought, I'm not dropping out. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to graduate on time. I'm going to be successful. And you're not going to label me as a bad kid because I had a trauma problem.
Right. They didn't know that, but you knew that.
And so I fought my way.
They didn't know that,
yes.
But you knew that.
Yes.
And unfortunately, this goes back to the conversation we had earlier. People love to pass judgments based off what they see, but they don't know the backstory.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. And by the way, my backstory was not horrific like yours, but that's not an excuse for poor behavior for me today.
Yes. We have a choice. We can let the darkness consume us and live in the past, or we can choose victory and move forward. We can have forgiveness. We can let go of bitterness, because all those things just kill us and destroy us. And right. I choose life. I choose abundant life.
Let me take a short break. We're talking with Tammy Tony Butler. She was sex trafficked as a child by her mother. Her father was a Gwinnett County police captain who died by suicide. Her husband recently retired from a sheriff's office in Florida, which we'll talk about in a few moments. She is a retired ER nurse. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com. She wrote a book called A Journeying Journal, The Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Return our conversation with Tammy Tony Butler on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She was sex trafficked as a child by her mother, and her father, who was a Gwinnett County police captain, died by suicide. Was buried on Father's Day. Her husband recently retired from a sheriff's office in Florida, and she is a retired ER nurse. Her website is reflectivespacesministry.com. She wrote a book called A Journeying Journal to Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith, where you can get more details about that on her website, reflectivespacesministry.com. Tammy, your story is fascinating, and the part that's really fascinating is I know a little bit about what you're doing today. A lot of our listeners do not. You came from really dark places. You went through really, really bad stuff. But that doesn't describe who you are or the type of life you live today, does it?
Oh, no. I've been quite busy with trying to bring light into the darkness of child sex trafficking and of trauma and what it does, and those that try to cope with it through addictive tendencies. And I focus on the healing. I focus on the hope. I co-founded Nurses United Against Human Trafficking. My other co-founder is Dr. Francine Bononeri, and I turned that over to her. And now I have the healing ministry, Reflective Spaces Ministry. I go around and do empowering talks anywhere and just let individuals know that there's hope, that there's healing, and that, yes, bad things happen to me, but I overcame them. And, I lost over 70 pounds. I no longer have a food addiction. I no longer, have alcohol that I need to cope or sleeping pills to get to sleep. I don't have any of that stuff. I'm truly walking with no shame, no fear, no regret, and just a woman on a mission to go after the one, even if the 99 are safe, because I have to pull them out of the darkness and bring them into the light and let them know that hope exists, because I don't want to lose anyone else to suicide.
That's true.
I don't want to lose it in our children. I don't want to lose it in our adults. It is not our portion, and we can have abundant life. And I don't want anyone to take their life. I don't want that.
One of the things,
I do not want that.
And I'll phrase this as a question. For me, a big reason why I do what I do, I learned radio a long time ago, but it's to put a purpose to what I went through. This is part of my passion. So your passion for helping other people, is that driven by what you went through?
Oh, absolutely. I have a podcast, Reflective Hour with Tammy Tony Butler. I have one for Reflective Spaces Ministry, but also Reflective Hour. And if you go back to season 1, it's my story. I'm on the second season now, but it's my journey through faith, but also how, I've overcome certain things to get where I am. And, I did a trauma responsive pulpit series for leaders in the faith to understand how to minister to individuals with trauma. And like you said, create a non-judgmental milieu so that people don't prejudge, and that they give us the grace as we tell our stories, and expose that darkness into the light. Because once it's in the light, and once you talk about some of these deep, dark things, they no longer have a hold on you. No. And that's the success that I've had in the ministry, is individuals, I work with them, whether they're billionaires, all the way down to people homeless on the streets. Wherever they come to me and I interact with them, it is the same. They've suffered something in their childhood. They want to be free from it, and I give them the tools that they need in their tool chest for an abundant, successful life. And I do that through the lens of faith.
And some people will say that when you go through all these horrible things, you got to find some mechanism, some tools to compensate. For me, it comes down to a choice of the tools I chose to compensate with, the self-medicating with alcohol, other things, became an issue. And then that turned on me. So I had to replace it with healthier things. How do you think we have a choice in how we compensate or what we do to make up for whatever we went through?
Well, I want to be very clear here. There's people with trauma and they're sociopaths.
Oh, yeah.
There's people that are just pure evil. Okay? So we have to put that out there. But then there's individuals that if you trace back when you arrest them or when you pull them over at a traffic stop, and if you look all the way down in that thing called wings or whatever, all the way down, if you look at their juvenile, follow them all the way down to where they're juveniles, you will see, I guarantee you, in 99% of them, that they were beaten as a child, hurt. They had some type of intersection with the child welfare system, the juvenile justice system, and that things that they couldn't even control happened to them as a child, which shaped and molded them into the individuals they are today. And that caused them to intersect with the juvenile justice system, the adult criminal justice system. Maybe they had a pathway to arrest, a pathway to addiction. So we have to trace it back to the root. If we want to stop human trafficking, we want to stop suicide, if we want to stop this mental health crisis, this opioid pandemic that is destroying and killing our children and this nation, then we have to get back and go to the root. And childhood trauma and adversity is the root that we have to pull out and give them the ability to overcome that darkness so that they can be transformed in the light, as I am living proof of.
Let's go to your website, reflectivespacesministry.com. You also have a book called A Journeying Journal to Wholeness Through the Lens of Faith. What came first?
Oh, well, we sold everything to answer the call that God placed in our life, our sailboat, our home on the golf course, and everything. And we live on a 10-acre parcel of land, beautiful lake, and I live in just a little tiny home, 576 square foot, and that includes a front porch. And it allows us to be able to pour everything into the ministry, into the boots on the ground work, to try to stop the predeterminate factors that are opening individuals up to being victimized. And so did all that, formed Reflective Spaces Ministry. Along that pathway, I had founded Nurses United Against Human Trafficking. And I published first book, and then I published the second book, which you mentioned, which is the devotional journal. So that came after that. And I also I want to make mention, because I'm on your platform, I co-authored and worked and did 3 chapters in a human trafficking textbook with public safety professionals for the School of Public Safety. So I partnered up with police officers and people in the judiciary and and others to form this system-wide public safety and community approach put out by Dr. Goltz and Dr. Potter out of the University of Central Florida and Valencia College. So did that book as well. Have many different academic accolades and all that stuff. But again, it's just my journey and my faith that is caused me to keep stepping, keep going forward, because I don't want anybody to perish.
No.
I don't want anybody to perish for lack of knowledge. And I have found the tools to wholeness and healing, and I want it to infect everybody. And I want them to come away realizing they aren't what happened to them. They can overcome. They do matter. They are fearfully, beautifully, and wonderfully made. And I don't want any of them to succumb to the lie that overthinking in their head that says you don't matter, you're not worthy, you'll never make it, you messed up at work, maybe you aren't on patrol anymore and you went to the shop. Because I do remember my father, he went out of patrol and he was in the shop, and you aren't a demotion.
Right.
You aren't
that's what
an addiction.
We do. That's not who we are. Your website, again, we're almost out of time, is reflectivespacesministry.com. That's reflectivespacesministry.com. Can people get more information about you, your podcast, your books, and all the different services you have there?
Oh, absolutely. And I have a pretty big online presence, so you can Google Tammy Tony Butler and it'll come up. But yes, you can go to the website and it will hyperlink to ways to find me. And my contact email is there, and do reach out to me. I do respond back to you.
Tammy, thanks so much for telling your story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And again, there's hotline information if you need hotline support after this on our website as well.
This was the podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another great episode of the show. See you then.